Pillar number 3. Endogamy and the control of marriage and mating. The framers of the American caste system took steps early in its founding to keep the castes separate and to seal off the bloodlines of those assigned to the upper rung. This desire led to the third pillar of caste, endogamy, which means restricting marriage to people within the same caste. This is an ironclad foundation of any caste system, from ancient India to the early American colonies to the Nazi regime in Germany. Endogamy was brutally enforced in the United States for the vast majority of its history and did the spade work for current ethnic divisions. Endogamy enforces caste boundaries by forbidding marriage outside of one's group and going so far as to prohibit sexual relations, or even the appearance of romantic interest across caste lines. It builds a firewall between castes and becomes the primary means of keeping resources and affinity within each tier of the caste system. Endogamy, by closing off legal family connection, blocks the chance for empathy or a sense of shared destiny between the castes. It makes it less likely that someone in the dominant caste will have a personal stake in the happiness, fulfillment, or well-being of anyone deemed beneath them, or personally identify with them or their plight. Endogamy, in fact, makes it more likely that those in the dominant caste will see those deemed beneath them as not only less than human, but as an enemy, as not of their kind, and as a threat that must be held in check at all costs. Caste, wrote Bhimrao Ambedkar, the father of the anti-caste movement in India, means an artificial chopping off of the population into fixed and definite units, each one prevented from fusing into another through the custom of endogamy. Thus, in showing how endogamy is maintained, he added, we shall practically have proved the genesis and also the mechanism of caste. Before there was a United States of America, there was endogamy, said to be ordained by God. One of the earliest references to what would come to be known as race in America arose over the matter of sexual relations between a European and an African. In 1630, the Virginia General Assembly sentenced Hugh Davis to a public whipping for having abused himself to the dishonor of God and the shame of Christians by defiling his body in lying with a Negro. The Assembly went to the trouble of specifying that Africans, who might not normally be permitted to observe the punishment of a dominant caste man, had to attend and witness the whipping of Davis. This served a dual function in the emerging caste system. It further humiliated Davis before an audience of people deemed beneath him, and it signaled a warning to those being banished to the lowest caste in a country that did not yet even exist. If this was the fate of a white man who did not adhere to caste boundaries, so much worse will it be for you. By the time of Davis's sentencing, European men had been having sex with African women, often without consent or consequence to themselves, throughout the era of the slave trade, and had grown accustomed to acting upon their presumed sovereignty over Africans. So for the colonial fathers to condemn Hugh Davis to public humiliation for behavior that many took as a birthright meant that he had crossed a line they found threatening to the hierarchy, something about the way he related to his mate that got their attention and required their intervention. The emerging caste system permitted the exploitation of the lowest caste, but not equality or the appearance of equality, which is why endogamy, which confers an alliance between equals in the eyes of the law, was strictly policed, and rape of lower caste women ignored. The case of Hugh Davis was not only the first mention of race and hierarchy in America, but also the first attempt at setting the boundaries of publicly known relationships across caste lines. 10 years later, another white man, Robert Sweet, was forced to do penance when it came to light that he had gotten an enslaved black woman, owned by another white man, pregnant. By then, the focus of caste enforcement had shifted. In that case, it was the pregnant woman who was whipped, a sign of her degraded caste status despite a medical condition that would have protected her in most civilized nations. In 1691, Virginia became the first colony to outlaw marriage between blacks and whites, a ban that the majority of states would take up for the next 3 centuries. Some states forbade the marriage of whites to Asians or Native Americans in addition to African Americans, who were uniformly excluded. While there was never a single nationwide ban on intermarriage, despite several attempts to enact one, 41 of the 50 states passed laws making intermarriage a crime punishable by fines of up to $5,000 and up to 10 years in prison. Some states went so far as to forbid the passage of any future law permitting intermarriage. Outside of the law, particularly in the South, African Americans faced penalty of death for even the appearance of breaching this pillar of caste. The Supreme Court did not overturn these prohibitions until 1967. Still, some states were slow to officially repeal their endogamy laws. Alabama, the last state to do so, did not throw out its law against intermarriage until the year 2000.